A simple evening at the diner became a battle for survival when a quick-thinking waitress spotted three assassins closing in on a powerful Italian mafia boss and risked her life to stop them. Where are you watching from? Comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The moment he walked through the glass door, every conversation in the restaurant died like someone had flipped a switch, and Elena's hands froze mid-wipe on the counter because she recognized danger when it wore a $1,000 suit and had eyes that could cut through steel. The man was tall, broader than the doorframe seemed to allow, with black hair slicked back from a face that looked carved from marble by an angry sculptor, and his neck bore tattoos that crawled up from beneath his collar like dark vines searching for sunlight. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing nobody would ever tell him no, his leather shoes clicking against the checkered floor in a rhythm that matched Elena's suddenly racing heartbeat, and she noticed how everyone else in the diner had suddenly found their plates fascinating, heads bowed like they were praying to their meatloaf and mashed potatoes. The kitchen door swung open behind her, letting out a burst of grease-scented steam, and Carlos the cook gave her a look that said, "Stay away from that one." But Elena had bills to pay and a little brother who needed new shoes, so she grabbed a menu and walked forward anyway, forcing her smile into place like armor. The man chose a booth in the back corner, positioning himself so his back faced the brick wall, and his eyes commanded a view of both entrances. And when Elena approached, she saw the bulge under his jacket that could only be one thing, though she pretended not to notice, because survival in this neighborhood meant learning what not to see. "Good evening, sir. Can I start you with something to drink?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. And he looked up at her with eyes the color of espresso, studying her face like he was memorizing it for some future purpose, his scrutiny making her skin prickle with awareness. "Water, no ice. And bring me the special," he said, his accent thick and Italian, each word deliberate. And Elena nodded, writing nothing down because she never forgot an order. Her memory, one of the few talents that kept her employed in a place that cycled through waitresses like tissues. She turned away, feeling those dark eyes burning into her spine, and headed back toward the kitchen, passing old Joe at table 3 who was pretending to read his newspaper but hadn't turned a page in 10 minutes, and the couple by the window who were eating in complete silence, their earlier laughter extinguished. Elena pushed through to the kitchen where Carlos was already plating the meatball marinara, his usual special, and he grabbed her wrist before she could take the dish, his fingers urgent against her pulse. "That's Dante Moretti," he whispered, his breath hot and panicked against her ear. "The Moretti family controls everything from here to the waterfront. You don't talk to him, you don't look at him wrong, you just serve and disappear. Understand?" Elena nodded, pulling free, because she'd heard the stories whispered in laundromats and corner stores, tales of men who vanished, of businesses that burned, of a family whose name made cops look the other way, and politicians count their campaign donations twice. She carried the plate out with a glass of water balanced on her tray, her sneakers silent against the floor, and placed both in front of Dante Moretti without spilling a drop, her hands rock steady despite the fear crawling up her throat like a living thing. A gentleness that contradicted everything about his appearance, before she stepped back and returned to her other tables, checking on the elderly woman who always ordered decaf and pie, refilling coffee for the construction workers in booth 5, clearing dishes and wiping surfaces, while her mind stayed locked on the dangerous man in the corner. The clock above the counter showed 8:47. And outside the window, the city was painting itself in neon and shadow. Car horns blaring, voices shouting, life continuing despite the tension coiled inside these four walls. Dante ate slowly, methodically, occasionally glancing at his phone, and Elena noticed how his jaw clenched when he read whatever message appeared on the screen, how his free hand curled into a fist that revealed scarred knuckles and more tattoos wrapping around his fingers like brass knuckles made of ink. The bell above the door jingled, and Elena looked up reflexively, her waitress instincts cataloging new customers, but something felt wrong immediately, a discord in the air, like a guitar string tuned too tight. 3 men entered, dressed too casually for the cold, outside, their jackets loose, and hands buried in pockets in a way that made Elena's stomach clench, because she'd grown up in neighborhoods where you learned to recognize predators by their posture alone. They didn't look at the hostess stand, didn't scan for empty tables, their eyes locking onto Dante Moretti with the focus of hunters spotting prey. And Elena saw the moment Dante noticed them too, saw how his entire body shifted from relaxed to ready, without him moving an inch, like a blade sliding from its sheath. The three men spread out, one heading toward the restrooms, another stopping near the counter, the third approaching Dante's booth with a smile that held no warmth, just teeth and terrible intentions. Elena moved without thinking, her body carrying her forward even as her brain screamed at her to run, to hide, to let whatever was about to happen unfold without her involvement. But something deeper overrode that survival instinct, some fundamental inability to watch violence happen when she could stop it. She reached Dante's table just as the approaching man's hand emerged from his jacket, holding something metallic and deadly. And Elena didn't pause to consider consequences or calculate odds. She simply raised her voice and commanded with every ounce of authority her 5'4" frame could muster. "Don't move." The entire restaurant froze like she'd cast a spell, every head turning toward her, including the gunman's, his eyes widening in surprise, because nobody expected a waitress in a grease-stained apron to become an obstacle. In that crystallized second, Elena grabbed the coffee pot from the nearest table and hurled the scalding liquid directly into the gunman's face, his scream tearing through the shocked silence as he stumbled backward, weapon clattering to the floor, and Dante exploded into motion, faster than Elena thought possible for a man his size, his hand lashing out to grab her arm and yank her behind him, just as the second gunman at the counter pulled his own weapon. The diner erupted into chaos, customers screaming and diving under tables, Carlos shouting from the kitchen, plates shattering against tile, and Dante shoved Elena toward the floor, while simultaneously kicking the fallen gun toward the bathroom hallway where the third attacker was emerging. Everything happened in heartbeats and gunpowder, Dante moving like a choreographed dancer of violence, his fist connecting with the coffee-burned attacker's throat, dropping him instantly, then pivoting to catch the second gunman's wrist and twist until bones cracked audibly and another weapon fell. The third man raised his gun, aiming at Dante's back. And Elena didn't think, just acted, grabbing a heavy ceramic plate from the booth and launching it like a frisbee directly at the shooter's head, the dish connecting with his temple in a sound like a baseball bat hitting a watermelon, and he crumpled sideways, unconscious, before he completed his fall. The entire confrontation lasted maybe 20 seconds, though Elena's perception had stretched each moment into an eternity. And when silence crashed back down, she found herself on the floor behind Dante's booth, her chest heaving, hands shaking, adrenaline singing through her veins like electricity. Dante stood over the three unconscious attackers, breathing hard but controlled. And when he turned to look down at Elena, his expression held something she couldn't name, surprise mixed with respect, mixed with curiosity, like he'd discovered something rare and unexpected. "You just saved my life," he said, his voice rough, and extended his hand toward her, palm up, an invitation rather than a command. Elena stared at that scarred hand for a moment, understanding instinctively that taking it meant crossing a line she could never uncross, that this moment would divide her life into before and after, but her fingers were already reaching, already accepting. And when his hand closed around hers, warm and solid and surprisingly gentle, she felt the world tilt on its axis. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, and they stood there among the wreckage, and the cowering customers, and the unconscious would-be assassins, locked in a gaze that communicated more than words could hold, before sirens began wailing in the distance, growing closer. "I need to leave," Dante said, still holding her hand, "and you're coming with me." It wasn't a question, but Elena nodded anyway because staying meant police reports and witness statements, and becoming a target for whoever sent these three, and because something in Dante's eyes promised protection, answers, and a future that looked nothing like her past. He released her hand only to shrug off his jacket and drape it over her shoulders. The leather still warm from his body and smelling of expensive cologne and gunpowder. Then guided her toward the back exit with a hand on her lower back, moving quickly, but not frantically, his demeanor shifting from warrior back to controlled businessman. They burst through the rear door into an alley, where a black car waited, engine running, a driver already pulling forward, and Dante opened the back door for her with old-world courtesy that seemed absurd, given they were fleeing a crime scene. Elena climbed in, her mind reeling, and Dante slid in beside her, the door closing with an expensive thunk that sealed them away from the screaming sirens now flooding the street out front. "Drive," Dante told the driver. An older man with silver hair and calm eyes that suggested he'd seen worse. And the car pulled smoothly into traffic, becoming just another vehicle in the city's endless flow. Elena's hands were still shaking, so she clasped them in her lap, acutely aware of Dante watching her, studying her profile in the passing streetlight. "What's your name? What's your name?" he asked. And she noticed he was dabbing at a cut on his cheek with a handkerchief, blood bright against the white fabric. "Elena Vasquez," she answered, her voice smaller than she wanted. "I'm 23. I have a younger brother named Miguel. We live in an apartment on 9th Street. And I just assaulted 3 people with restaurant equipment." Dante's laugh was unexpected, genuine, transforming his severe face into something almost boyish. "You assaulted 3 hired killers from the Calabrese family who were sent to murder me during dinner, which technically makes you my guardian angel, though I've never known angels to weaponize coffee and dinnerware." Elena turned to fully face him, seeing him properly for the first time without immediate danger clouding her perception, noticing the intelligence in those dark eyes, the precise grooming of his beard, the way his shirt collar revealed more tattoos that looked like they told stories in ink. "Why did they want to kill you?" she asked. Because if her life was being upended, she deserved to know why. Dante considered her for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth she could handle. "My family controls shipping, distribution, and various business interests throughout the city. The Calabrese family wants those interests. Tonight was their opening move in what will likely become a war." The casual way he said war made Elena's stomach drop. "And now I'm involved." "Yes," Dante confirmed, no apology in his tone. "Just fact. You're involved. Which means you're in danger. Which means you're under my protection. Until this is resolved." Away from everything familiar, and she watched her reflection in the window. A ordinary waitress, wearing a Mafia boss's jacket. Her entire existence transformed in 20 seconds of coffee-throwing chaos. "I need to call my brother," she said, and Dante immediately produced his phone, unlocking it and handing it over without hesitation, which surprised her because she'd expected possessiveness, control. But his gesture spoke of trust, however conditional. Elena dialed Miguel's number with shaking fingers, and when his 15-year-old voice answered with, "Yeah?" she had to swallow hard before speaking. "Miguel, it's me. I need you to listen very carefully. Pack your backpack with clothes and your school stuff. Go to Mrs. Chen next door and tell her there's an emergency. Ask if you can stay with her tonight. Don't go back to the apartment until I call you again. Do you understand?" Miguel's confusion came through clearly. "Elena, what's happening? Are you okay?" "I'm safe," she lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie, because despite everything, she felt safer sitting next to Dante Moretti than she probably should. "Just do what I said, please, and I'll explain everything soon. I love you." Returned the phone to Dante, who was watching her with an expression that might have been approval. "Smart move, protecting your family first," he said, pocketing the device. "My people will make sure your brother and neighbor are secure." Elena wanted to ask how, wanted details and guarantees, but exhaustion was crashing over her like a wave, the adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow and shaky. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, Dante answered. As the car pulled through iron gates into a property that looked more like a fortress than a home, trees lining a long driveway that led to a stone mansion with lights glowing in multiple windows. My family's estate. You'll have your own room. Anything you need. And tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. The car stopped under a portico, and the silver-haired driver opened Elena's door, offering his hand with grandfatherly gentleness. Welcome, Miss Vasquez. I'm Vincent. If you need anything, at all, please ask. Elena climbed out, her legs unsteady, and stared up at the house that looked like something from a movie. All carved stone and arched windows and architectural grandeur that didn't belong to her world of linoleum and fluorescent lighting. Dante appeared beside her, his presence somehow reassuring despite representing everything dangerous. Come inside, he said. And she followed. Because what choice did she have, trailing him through doors that opened onto marble floors and crystal chandeliers and artwork that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime? A woman appeared, older, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled into a neat bun. And Dante spoke to her in rapid Italian before turning back to Elena. This is Maria. She'll show you to your room and bring you anything you need. Rest, shower, eat. Tomorrow we'll talk properly. Elena nodded, following Maria up a curving staircase that felt like ascending into a dream, down a hallway lined with oil paintings of stern-faced men who shared Dante's cheekbones and intensity, until they reached a door that opened onto a bedroom larger than Elena's entire apartment. The bathroom is through there, Maria said in accented English, pointing to an adjoining door. I'll bring you some clothes that should fit and something to eat. You're safe here, dear. Dante protects what's his. The phrasing made Elena's cheeks warm. But before she could correct the assumption, Maria had left, closing the door softly, and Elena was alone in a room with a bed that could sleep four. Windows overlooking gardens she couldn't quite see in the darkness, and furniture that looked antique and priceless. She caught her reflection in a floor-length mirror and barely recognized herself, hair wild, apron stained, eyes too wide, still wearing Dante's jacket like a claim. Elena shrugged it off, draping it carefully over a chair, then walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Hours ago she'd been worried about tips and whether old Joe would leave his usual $2. Now she was hiding in a mansion, having saved a mafia boss twice, with hired killers presumably wanting her dead, and her entire future uncertain. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts, and Maria returned with an armful of clothes and a tray bearing soup, bread, fruit, and water. Eat, then sleep, the older woman instructed with maternal firmness. Tomorrow will bring its own troubles. Tonight, just rest. After Maria left, Elena ate mechanically, the food delicious but tasteless through her shock, then showered in a bathroom with marble and gold fixtures, washing away the smell of grease and fear, standing under water pressure that felt like luxury itself until her skin pruned. She dressed in the provided silk pajamas that fit perfectly and climbed into the massive bed. Sinking into sheets, with a thread count she couldn't begin to guess. And despite everything, exhaustion pulled her under like a riptide. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through curtains she didn't remember. In a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds, with a moment of complete disorientation before memory crashed back and she sat up, heart pounding, looking around the unfamiliar room. A knock sounded, and Maria entered carrying a breakfast tray. Good morning. Dante asks if you'll join him in his office after you eat and dress. Fresh clothes are in the closet. Elena nodded. Way, eating pastries and drinking coffee that tasted like it cost more than her hourly wage. Then dressed in jeans and a soft sweater that fit like they'd been tailored for her, which made her wonder exactly how Dante had procured the correct sizes. She followed Maria's directions through the mansion, down corridors lined with photos and paintings, until they reached a heavy wooden door that stood slightly ajar. Elena knocked, heard Dante's come in, and entered an office, dominated by a massive desk, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and windows overlooking manicured gardens where fountains sparkled in morning light. Dante stood from behind his desk, dressed more casually than last night in dark slacks and a white shirt with sleeves rolled to reveal those tattooed forearms. And he looked younger in daylight, more human, though no less dangerous. "Elena, sit, please." She took one of the leather chairs facing his desk, folding her hands in her lap to keep them still. "Did you sleep?" he asked. And she nodded, surprised he cared. "Good. We need to discuss your situation. The Calabrese family knows you interfered last night. They'll assume you're connected to me, which makes you a target. You can't go back to your normal life. Not yet. Maybe not ever." The words hit like punches. "What about Miguel? My job? My apartment? Your brother is safe. I've had him moved to a secure location where he thinks you're on an unexpected work trip. Your landlord has been paid through the end of the year. Your boss at the diner received a family emergency story and a generous compensation for your sudden departure." Dante delivered this calmly, hands folded on his desk, and Elena felt control of her life slipping through her fingers like sand. "You don't get to just rearrange my entire existence," she protested, anger finally cutting through her shock. "You don't own me." Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been respect. "No, I don't. But I do owe you my life, twice over, and I protect my debts. Right now, your choices are limited. Stay here under my protection while we eliminate the threat, or try to survive alone against an organization with unlimited resources and no conscience." Elena wanted to argue, to assert her independence. But she wasn't stupid. How long? Days. Weeks. Possibly longer. The Calabrese family won't stop. Until they've made an example, unless we strike first. The casual way he discussed violence made Elena's skin crawl, but she forced herself to stay calm, to think. "And what do you expect from me during this time?" Dante stood, walking around his desk to lean against it, closer to her now, and Elena caught his scent, clean and masculine with a hint of spice. "I expect nothing. You saved my life. I'm protecting yours. That's the transaction. But..." He paused, studying her face. "I saw how you moved last night, how quickly you assessed and acted. That's rare. If you wanted, I could train you, teach you how to properly defend yourself. Maybe find a role for you in my organization that doesn't involve getting shot at." Elena stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. "You want to recruit me? I want to give you options," Dante corrected. "You're smart, brave, resourceful. Those qualities are valuable, but if you'd rather I simply keep you safe until this is over, and then return you to your life, I'll respect that too." Before Elena could respond, the office door burst open, and a younger man rushed in, mid-20s, with Dante's features but wilder, his suit disheveled. "Dante, we have a problem. The Calabrese hit our warehouse, on the waterfront. 2 men dead, product gone." Dante's entire demeanor shifted, the gentleman vanishing and the boss emerging, his face hardening into something carved from ice. "When?" 20 minutes ago. "It's retaliation for last night." The younger man's eyes flicked to Elena. "Is this the waitress everyone's talking about?" "My brother, Luca," Dante introduced, tersely. "And yes, this is Elena Vasquez, who saved my life. Show respect." Luca's expression transformed into something approaching awe. "The woman who threw coffee and plates at armed hitmen? You're either incredibly brave or completely insane." "Little bit of both," Elena heard. "A plus," herself say. And Luca laughed, loud and genuine, some of the tension breaking. "I like her. Can we keep her?" Dante shot his brother a warning look. "Luca, gather the family. Conference room in 20 minutes." We're responding to this. After Luca left, Dante turned back to Elena, and she saw genuine regret in his eyes. I need to handle this. Maria will stay with you. Don't leave the estate grounds. I'll be back as soon as possible. He moved toward the door, and Elena stood abruptly. Dante. He stopped, turning, and she closed the distance between them, looking up at his face. Be careful. And thank you for protecting Miguel. Something softened in his expression, and he reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture so unexpectedly tender that Elena's breath caught. I always protect what matters, he said quietly, then left, his footsteps fading down the hallway, leaving Elena alone with the scent of his cologne and a feeling in her chest she didn't want to name. The next hours crawled past with agonizing slowness, Elena wandering the estate gardens with Maria trailing discreetly behind, her mind refusing to settle, replaying Dante's touch, his words, the warmth in his eyes that contradicted everything she thought she knew about men like him. She was sitting by a fountain, trailing her fingers through cool water, when shouting erupted from the house, followed by the sound of cars screeching away. And Maria's hand landed firm on her shoulder. Stay here, the older woman commanded, but Elena was already moving, running toward the house because something felt desperately wrong, bursting through the side entrance into chaos as men in dark suits rushed past, some bleeding, all armed, and she grabbed one by the arm. What happened? Where's Dante? The man, young with a scar across his chin, looked at her with wild eyes. Ambush, at the warehouse meeting. Dante's been shot. They're bringing him in now. Elena's world tilted, her stomach dropping into freefall, and she pushed past him toward the front of the house where she could hear car doors slamming, voices shouting instructions, and then she saw them carrying him. Dante's tall frame supported between Luca and another man. His white shirt soaked red on the left side. His face pale but conscious, and their eyes met across the chaos with an impact that felt physical. Elena, he said. Just her name. And she was moving before thinking. Rushing forward, ignoring the protests, reaching him just as they lowered him onto a couch in what looked like a formal sitting room, suddenly transformed into a makeshift emergency room. I'm fine, Dante insisted through gritted teeth, but blood was spreading. Too much blood. And an older man with doctor's bag was already cutting away the shirt, revealing a bullet wound high on Dante's left shoulder, still bleeding despite the pressure someone had applied. Can you save him? Elena demanded, grabbing the doctor's arm, and the man nodded calmly. Bullet went through clean. Missed anything vital. He'll be fine if I can stop the bleeding and prevent infection. Elena backed away, giving him space, but kept her eyes locked on Dante's face, watching him breathe through obvious pain while the doctor worked, Luca pacing like a caged animal, other men coming and going with reports and updates that Elena barely registered. Dante's eyes never left her face, even when the doctor probed the wound, even when they poured disinfectant that must have burned like fire. And Elena found herself moving closer again, drawn by something she couldn't resist, until she was kneeling beside the couch, taking Dante's uninjured hand in both of hers. You said you'd be careful, she whispered, and his mouth curved into something almost like a smile. Got distracted thinking about you, he replied, voice rough with pain, and despite everything, Elena felt heat flood her cheeks. The doctor finished his work, bandaging the wound with professional efficiency. Rest for 3 days, minimum. No strenuous activity for 2 weeks. You're lucky, Dante. After everyone cleared out except Luca standing guard at the door, Elena remained kneeling beside Dante, still holding his hand, and he squeezed her fingers gently. You should have stayed in the garden where it was safe, he said. Should have. Yes, Elena agreed. But apparently, I make terrible decisions around you. Dante's laugh turned into a wince. That makes two of us. They stayed like that for a long moment, the air between them heavy with everything unspoken, until Dante's eyes drifted closed. Exhaustion and pain medication pulling him under, and only then did Elena release his hand, standing on shaky legs. Luca approached, his expression serious. He's never looked at anyone the way he looks at you. Whatever this is between you two, it's real. Which means you've become the most valuable target in this entire war. The Calabrese family will figure that out eventually. And when they do, they'll come for you to get to him. Elena met his eyes steadily. Then, I need to learn how to fight back properly. Can you teach me? Luca's grin was sharp and approving. Oh, I like you very much. Training starts tomorrow. Over the following days, Elena's world transformed completely. As Luca and various guards taught her defensive techniques, weapons handling, situational awareness, while Dante recovered with a stubbornness that had him back on his feet faster than medically advisable. She watched him conduct business from his office, making decisions that moved millions of dollars and countless lives, saw the respect his men showed him mixed with genuine affection, and began understanding that Dante Moretti was far more complicated than the monster she'd expected. They fell into a rhythm, Elena training during the day, joining Dante for dinners, where they talked about everything except the obvious attraction, building between them like static electricity, both circling something neither seemed ready to name. Then came the night when everything shifted, when Elena woke to her door opening and Dante slipping inside, moving to her bed where she sat up instantly alert, her training kicking in before she recognized him in the moonlight. "What's wrong?" she whispered, and Dante sat on the edge of her bed, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I received intelligence that the Calabrese family knows exactly who you are and what you mean to me. They're planning to take you tomorrow during your morning run." Elena's pulse jumped. "How do they know my routine?" "Because I've been predictable, and they've been watching. So tomorrow, we change the game. You're going to let them take you. And I'm going to follow and end this war permanently." The plan was insane, using Elena as bait, but as Dante explained the details, she understood the strategy, how they'd turn the enemy's confidence into a trap. "I won't let anything happen to you," Dante promised, his hand coming up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You've become too important." Elena's breath stuttered at his touch, at the raw honesty in his eyes. "Dante." "I know," he interrupted softly. "This is complicated and dangerous, and probably the worst timing imaginable. But Elena, you've gotten under my skin in a way I didn't think was possible anymore. You make me want things I thought I'd given up on." His confession hung between them like a physical presence, and Elena made a choice. Closing the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that tasted like gunpowder and redemption, feeling his sharp intake of breath before he responded, his hands tangling in her hair, the kiss deepening into something that erased the space between danger and desire. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "After tomorrow, when this is over, I want to do this right, take you on actual dates, show you my world without the violence. Let you choose me, without fear forcing your hand." "I already chose you," Elena whispered back. "The moment I threw that coffee, I chose you." The next morning arrived too quickly. Elena dressed in running clothes with a tracking device sewn into her shoe and a panic button disguised as her watch. Dante and his men positioned in vehicles ready to follow at a distance, the entire plan balanced on a knife's edge. Elena started her run through the estate grounds, heart pounding not from exertion but from anticipation. And exactly where Dante predicted, a van appeared. Men jumping out, grabbing her despite her trained resistance, throwing her inside. And she activated the panic button even as they blindfolded and bound her wrists. The van drove 4, what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, stopping finally in what sounded like a warehouse from the echoing acoustics. And when they removed her blindfold, Elena found herself facing an older man with cruel eyes, who smiled like a shark. The famous waitress who thinks she can play in our world. Dante Moretti's little pet. He'll come for you, and when he does, we'll kill him and everyone he loves. Elena kept her face blank, showing nothing. Using the techniques Luca taught her, counting exits, noting the guards, looking for weapons and advantages. He won't come, she lied smoothly. I'm just a girl he felt obligated to protect. I'm not worth dying for. The man's laugh was ugly. Oh, but you are. We've seen how he looks at you. You're the key to ending the Moretti family forever. Outside, hidden in shadows and strategic positions, Dante and 15 of his best men waited for Elena's signal, the tracking device showing her exact location, weapons ready, every second of waiting torture for Dante, who had never felt fear like this. The thought of losing Elena, cutting deeper than any bullet. Inside the warehouse, Elena watched the boss turn away, conferring with his lieutenants. And she made her move, snapping the weakened zip tie Luca had taught her to break, grabbing the nearest guard's weapon, and firing 3 shots into the air while dropping to the ground. The signal they'd arranged. Chaos erupting instantly. Dante and his men stormed in like an avenging army, gunfire exploding in the confined space. Elena staying low and moving toward cover. Her training taking over, even as fear threatened to freeze her, and then Dante was there, appearing beside her like something conjured from her desperation. Pulling her behind a crate, checking her for injuries with hands that shook slightly. "You okay?" he demanded. And Elena nodded, grabbing his face and kissing him hard, because they were alive and together, and nothing else mattered in that moment. The firefight ended quickly, Dante's men overwhelming the Calabrese forces with superior tactics and motivation. And when the dust settled, the Calabrese boss knelt with hands zip-tied, surrounded by Dante's people. The power structure of the city's underworld fundamentally shifted. Dante stood over him, Elena by his side, and spoke with quiet finality. "This war is over. Touch anyone in my family again, including her, and what's left of your organization disappears. Understand?" The defeated boss nodded, and Dante signaled his men to take him away, then turned to Elena, pulling her close despite his men watching. Despite every protocol that said showing weakness was dangerous. "Take me home," Elena whispered against his chest. And Dante did, carrying her to his car and driving back to the estate, while Elena dozed against his shoulder, exhaustion and relief mixing into something that felt like safety. The days that followed brought change like a flood, the Calabrese family dismantled, peace treaties negotiated, and Dante finally having space to breathe, to live, to pursue something other than survival. He took Elena on dates through the city, showing her restaurants and theaters and rooftop gardens she'd never known existed. And she showed him her world too, the community centers and corner stores, and places where real people lived real lives, each learning the other's language. Miguel came home, his sister explaining everything in terms that were honest but age-appropriate. And the teenager took one look at how Dante treated Elena. Protective but respectful, gentle but strong, and gave his approval with typical teenage bluntness. "He's all right, I guess, for a scary mafia boss. Just don't hurt her or I'll figure out how to hurt you back." Months passed like pages turning. Elena training until she could hold her own. Taking a position in Dante's organization, managing community outreach and legitimate business interests, finding purpose in using the family's resources to actually help the neighborhoods she'd grown up in, and discovering that not everything about this life was violence and fear. Dante showed her his softer side, the man who read poetry and supported local schools anonymously, and treated his people like family rather than soldiers. And Elena showed him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that letting someone in made you stronger rather than exposed. They built something together in the spaces between danger and domesticity. A relationship forged in coffee and gunfire, strengthened by trust and tested by fire, and on a warm evening 6 months after that first explosive meeting, Dante took Elena back to the diner where everything began. Now, under new ownership, but still serving the same meatball marinara, they sat in the same booth where he'd eaten alone that fateful night, and Dante reached across the table to take her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture that had become familiar and beloved. I never believed in fate until a waitress told me not to move and threw coffee at armed killers to save my life, he said quietly, his accent wrapping around the words like silk. Now I think maybe some things are meant to happen. Some people are meant to collide, even if the circumstances are insane. Elena smiled, squeezing his fingers. So what you're saying is you're grateful I have terrible self-preservation instincts. I'm saying I'm grateful you saw something in me worth saving, and that I got the chance to see everything in you worth treasuring. Outside the window, the city continued its eternal dance of light and shadow, danger and beauty coexisting like they always had. But inside the diner, in their booth, Elena and Dante created their own world, one built on the foundation of a moment when a brave woman refused to look away, and a dangerous man learned that the strongest protection was letting someone behind his walls. And though their story had begun with violence and fear, it continued with something far more powerful, the kind of love that emerged from choosing each other repeatedly, despite every reason not to, the kind that transformed both their lives from what they were into everything they could be together. If you loved Elena's bravery, hit like and subscribe. Comment where you'd run if you were in her shoes. And don't forget to tell me where you're from. I want to know where this beautiful story has reached.